The great hall of the northern pack smelled of old stone, burning torches, and hatred. Rowan stood in the center of the circular chamber, her swollen belly heavy between her shackled wrists, and tried not to show fear. The chains were iron, cold, heavy, meant for wolves far stronger than any Omega should be. They'd use them anyway, as if her condition and her pregnancy weren't enough to render her helpless. The council sat in a semicircle before her, 5 alphas whose expressions ranged from disgust to cold indifference. Behind them, the gallery overflowed with witnesses from her former pack, their faces twisted with righteous fury. She recognized some of them, people who'd watched her mate drag her through the streets by her hair, who'd heard her screaming through thin walls and done nothing. Now they shouted for her blood with the fervor of the faithful. "Murderer!" Someone spat from the crowd. "She carries a cursed child." Another voice joined in. "The prophecy speaks of it." Rowan's hands moved instinctively to her belly, protecting the life inside, even as her own hung by a thread. The baby kicked against her palm, strong and insistent. "Not cursed," she thought fiercely. "Never cursed. You're perfect." Elder Thorne, the head councilman, raised his hand for silence. The crowd's roar diminished to an angry murmur. He was ancient, his face carved with deep lines, his eyes the flat gray of winter ice. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Rowan of the Blackwater Pack, you stand accused of the murder of your mate, Garrett Thornson, in violation of sacred pack law." He paused, letting the words settle like a death shroud. "You are further accused of fornication with dark powers, resulting in the abomination you carry. How do you answer these charges?" "Not guilty." Her voice came out steadier than she'd hoped. She lifted her chin, meeting Thorne's gaze directly, though everything in her Omega instincts screamed to lower her eyes, to submit, to bow. But submission had nearly killed her once already. "I acted in self-defense. Garrett attacked me when I discovered—" "Lies!" The shout came from Garrett's brother, Cole, who stood at the front of the gallery. His face was mottled with rage, his hands gripping the wooden railing until his knuckles went white. "My brother was a respected warrior. You murdered him in his sleep like the coward you are." "That's not true," Rowan said, but her voice was drowned out by the crowd's renewed fury. "She was seen with blood on her hands. The healers confirmed it was his blood. Execute her." The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Rowan felt a contraction ripple across her belly. Not labor, not yet. Just her body's response to stress. She breathed through it carefully, not wanting to show weakness. These wolves would tear her apart at the first sign of vulnerability. "Order!" Thorne's command cracked like a whip. The hall fell silent again. He leaned forward, his gaze boring into Rowan. "The evidence against you is substantial. Your mate's body was found in your dwelling with 17 stab wounds. The murder weapon was found in your possession. You fled the scene rather than submit to pack justice. These facts are not in dispute." "Because no one would have believed me," Rowan said, desperation creeping into her voice despite her best efforts. Garrett was the Alpha's nephew. He could do whatever he wanted, and everyone looked the way. When I finally fought back, You admit to the killing, then?" It wasn't a question. Rowan's throat tightened. "I admit to defending myself and my child. That's not murder. That's survival." "An Omega does not raise her hand against her mate," Elder Thorne said flatly. "It is unnatural. It is an abomination against the moon goddess herself." "The moon goddess wouldn't condone what he did to me," Rowan shot back, and she heard the gasps ripple through the crowd. Speaking the goddess's name with such familiarity, with such assumed knowledge of her will, was its own kind of blasphemy from the mouth of an Omega. But Rowan was past caring about blasphemy. She was past caring about anything except the truth and the tiny life depending on her. "I have scars that prove what he did," she continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. I have healer records from every time I dragged myself to the clinic. I have. Circumstantial. The word came from Councilwoman Vera, a sharp-faced woman with steel-gray hair. Many mates discipline their partners. It's within their rights. You had no authority to take his life. The casual cruelty of it stole Rowan's breath. Discipline. As if the broken ribs and blackened eyes and nights when she'd been sure he would kill her had been nothing more than proper pack order. Another contraction tightened across her belly, stronger this time. Rowan gritted her teeth against it, forcing herself to stay upright. She couldn't show weakness. Not now. The matter of the child is equally concerning, Thorne continued, as if Rowan hadn't spoken at all. There are those who say it is touched by darkness, that you've been communing with old powers best left undisturbed. I've done no such thing, Rowan said. The pregnancy is natural. The baby is. The prophecy speaks of a child born of pain and blood, interrupted Elder Marcus, the youngest of the council and the only one who'd shown her even a flicker of sympathy. A child who will unite the divided packs or destroy them entirely. Some believe your child might be that prophesied one. The hall erupted into chaos. Half the crowd shouted in fear, demanding her immediate execution to prevent whatever catastrophe the prophecy foretold. The other half argued back, insisting that killing a prophesied child would bring the goddess's wrath down upon them all. Rowan swayed on her feet, exhaustion and fear and the weight of her pregnancy pulling at her. The torchlight seemed to blur and dance. Her back ached. Her wrists bled where the iron shackles had rubbed them raw. Enough! Thorne's voice boomed through the chamber, silencing the discord. We will not be swayed by superstition. This council deals in law and evidence. He looked at Rowan with something that might have been pity in a kinder man. You have been found guilty by your own admission of killing your mate. The sentence for such a crime is death. No. The word fell from Rowan's lips like a stone. Please, my baby. The child will be delivered by emergency procedure and given to a worthy family if it survives. You will be executed at dawn. The world tilted. Rowan's knees buckled, and she might have fallen if not for the chains holding her upright. They were going to take her baby. They were going to cut her open and steal the only good thing she'd ever made, and then they were going to kill her. However, Thorne said, and the word cut through Rowan's spiraling panic. Given the unusual nature of this case and the prophecy's mention, we have taken the extraordinary step of requesting oversight from the highest authority in the realm. Rowan's head jerked up. What? The Alpha King has been summoned to review this judgment. Thorne's expression suggested he found this development distasteful. He arrives tonight. Until then, you will be held in the dungeon to await his verdict. The Alpha King. Riverstone, the legendary warrior who'd united the fractured packs of the North through blood and diplomacy. Rowan had never seen him. Few wolves ever did, but his reputation preceded him. Ruthless, just, powerful beyond measure, and her last impossible hope. Take her away, Thorne commanded. Guards moved forward to grasp her arms. Rowan didn't resist as they dragged her toward the heavy wooden doors at the back of the hall. The crowd's jeers followed her, but she barely heard them. Her mind was racing, grasping at this new possibility like a drowning woman reaching for driftwood. The Alpha King was coming. Maybe he would see the truth that these small-minded council members refused to acknowledge. Maybe he would hear her story and understand that she'd had no choice, that it had been her life or Garrett's, her child's future, or his continued brutality. Or maybe he would take one look at her, a pregnant Omega who'd killed her mate, and order her execution himself. The dungeon was exactly as miserable as Rowan had imagined. The guards threw her into a cell that smelled of mildew and old fear, then removed her shackles with rough efficiency. The door clanged shut with a finality that made her stomach drop. She was alone. Rowan sank onto the thin pallet in the corner and wrapped her arms around her belly. The baby was still now, quiet after the earlier activity. She tried not to think about what tomorrow might bring, tried not to imagine the knife cutting through her flesh to steal her child before they took her head. "I won't let them hurt you," she whispered to her belly. "I promise. I'll find a way." It was a promise she had no idea how to keep, but it was all she had. The Alpha King arrived like a storm at twilight. Rowan heard the commotion from her cell, running feet, shouted orders, the unmistakable thrum of powerful dominance sweeping through the building like a physical force. Every wolf in the compound would feel it, that pressure that made you want to bare your throat and submit. Even tucked away in her dungeon cell, Rowan felt her wolf stir for the first time in months, responding to the call of an alpha unlike any she'd ever encountered. The guards came for her as the last light faded from the high window. They were rougher this time, clearly agitated by their king's presence. They shackled her wrists again and hauled her up the stone stairs, through corridors that seemed longer and darker than she remembered. The great hall had transformed in her absence. The gallery was even more packed now, wolves from other territories crowding in to witness the Alpha King's judgment. Torches blazed in their sconces, throwing dramatic shadows across the walls. The council sat in their places, but even they seemed diminished somehow, smaller and less certain. And at the center of it all, standing before the council's table with his back to the door, was the Alpha King. Riverstone was taller than any wolf Rowan had ever seen, his frame powerful even in stillness. He wore black leather and dark cloth that suggested both wealth and practicality. His hair was dark as midnight, pulled back to reveal a face carved with harsh, beautiful lines. Scars marked his hands and neck, a warrior's decorations. The guards dragged Rowan into the center of the hall. Every step felt like wading through deep water, her body heavy with exhaustion and pregnancy. She kept her eyes down as they positioned her in the same spot she'd stood before, her chains clinking softly in the sudden silence. "Your Majesty," Elderthorn began, his voice unctuous with respect. "Thank you for—" "Show me the accused." The Alpha King's voice was deep, commanding but not cruel. Rowan's wolf stirred again, pushing against the walls she'd built around it. She didn't understand the reaction. She'd learned to fear alphas, to recognize them as threats. But something about this one felt different. "Of course, Your Majesty. This is Rowan of the Blackwater Pack, guilty of—" "I didn't ask for her crimes. I asked to see her." The rebuke was mild but unmistakable. Rowan heard Thorn's sharp inhale of indignation. The guard's hands on her arms tightened, and then one of them grabbed her hair and yanked her head up, forcing her to look forward. Pain lanced across her scalp. Rowan bit back a cry, her hands instinctively moving to protect her belly. And then her eyes met the Alpha King's, and the entire world stopped. Later, she wouldn't be able to describe what she felt in that moment. It was like lightning and sunshine, and the first breath after drowning. It was recognition deeper than memory, connection more fundamental than thought. Her wolf surged forward with a joy so profound it brought tears to her eyes, crying out to its other half, its perfect match, its mate. The Alpha King's eyes widened, his nostrils flared. The dominance radiating from him spiked so sharply that wolves throughout the hall whimpered and dropped to their knees, but Rowan barely noticed them. She could only stare at this impossible man, this stranger who somehow felt like coming home. "No," she thought desperately. "No, this can't be happening. Not now. Not like this." "Release her," the Alpha King said, his voice rough. His eyes never left Rowan's face. "Get your hands off her now." The guards jerked back as if burned. Rowan swayed without their support, and in an instant the Alpha King was moving, crossing the distance between them with inhuman speed. He caught her before she could fall, one arm around her waist, the other steadying her shoulder. His touch was gentle despite his obvious strength. "I've got you," he murmured, and the words seemed meant for her alone despite the hundreds of witnesses. "You're safe now." Rowan wanted to believe him. Moon goddess. She wanted to believe him so badly it hurt, but she'd heard those words before from an alpha's mouth, and they'd been lies. "Your Majesty," she managed, her voice shaking. "I can stand." He studied her face for a long moment, something fierce and protective burning in his dark eyes. Then, slowly, he released her and stepped back. But he didn't move far, positioning himself between her and the council like a living shield. "Someone explained to me," he said, his voice carrying easily through the hall, "why a pregnant woman is in chains." "She's a murderer, Your Majesty," Elder Thorne said. "She killed her mate. She's dangerous. She's 9 months pregnant and barely able to stand." The Alpha King's contempt dripped from every word. "Remove her shackles. Now." A guard rushed forward with a key. The iron fell from Rowan's wrists with a clatter that seemed obscenely loud in the tense silence. She rubbed her raw skin carefully, not quite believing this was happening. The Alpha King turned to face the council fully, and Rowan saw his profile: the strong jaw, the sharp cheekbones, the set of his shoulders that suggested violence barely leashed. "I'm told this woman stands accused of murdering her mate in violation of pack law. I'm told there's talk of prophecy and cursed children and a rush to judgment that conveniently skips over any actual investigation. Is this accurate?" "Your Majesty, the facts of the case are clear," Thorne began. "Then you won't mind if I review them personally?" It wasn't a question. The Alpha King's gaze swept across the council, and Rowan saw more than one of them flinch. "I want every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every healer's report. I want them in my chambers within the hour." "Your Majesty, with respect, the matter is settled," Councilwoman Vera said, her voice sharp. "The accused has confessed. The sentence has been pronounced. We only called you here as a formality." "Then you wasted my time with a formality while preparing to execute a woman who may be innocent." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "I'm sure you can understand why that troubles me." The council members exchanged glances. Rowan could see the calculation in their faces, the political maneuvering. They'd wanted the Alpha King's stamp of approval on their decision, not his interference. "The execution is stayed," the Alpha King continued, "pending my review of all evidence. The accused will be moved from the dungeon to secure chambers in the fortress. She will be provided with food, medical care, and any comfort appropriate to her condition. Anyone who harms her or attempts to circumvent my authority will answer to me personally. Is that understood?" It was a command that could not be refused. The council members bowed their heads in reluctant acknowledgement. The crowd murmured, some in approval, others in clear disapproval. Rowan's legs trembled. She locked her knees to keep from swaying again, pride demanding that she not show more weakness. But inside, hope was unfurling like a fragile flower. He was helping her. The Alpha King, her mate, her impossible mate, was helping her. He turned back to her, and his expression softened fractionally. "Can you walk?" Rowan nodded, not trusting her voice. She took a step forward and immediately regretted it as her vision grayed at the edges. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. The baby was heavy. Everything hurt. The Alpha King caught her again, this time simply scooping her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Rowan gasped, her hands instinctively clutching his shoulders. She should protest. She should demand to walk on her own. But his arms felt safe in a way she'd almost forgotten was possible, and she was so tired of being strong alone. "Your Majesty, this is highly irregular," Thorne said, his voice tight with disapproval. "So is condemning a pregnant woman without proper investigation." The Alpha King looked down at Rowan, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Recognition, possessiveness, and a promise she didn't quite dare believe. Someone show me to her chambers. Now. A guard jumped forward to lead the way. The Alpha King carried Rowan from the hall with long, purposeful strides, and she felt hundreds of eyes following them. She knew what they were thinking. She knew how this looked. She also knew it would change nothing if she were still executed at dawn. But for now, held in the arms of her fated mate, feeling safe for the first time in months, Rowan let herself hope. The chambers they brought her to were nothing like the dungeon. Soft carpets cushioned stone floors. A fire crackled in a hearth large enough to stand in. The bed was enormous, piled with furs and blankets that looked clean and warm. Through tall windows, Rowan could see the moon rising over dark forests. The Alpha King set her down carefully on the edge of the bed, as if she were something precious rather than condemned. Rowan's hands twisted in her lap, unsure where to look, what to do. The mate bond hummed between them like a living thing, making her skin feel too tight. "The healer will be here shortly," he said, his voice gentler than it had been in the hall. "She'll examine you and the baby. Make sure you're both healthy." "Thank you." The words felt inadequate. "Your Majesty, River." He crouched in front of her so their eyes were level, and the casual strength in the movement made her breath catch. "My name is River. I need you to use it." It felt too intimate, too presumptuous, but when she met his gaze, she saw something there that made her brave. "River," she whispered, testing the name on her tongue. His eyes darkened. His hand lifted as if to touch her face, then fell back to his side. "I need to know everything, Rowan. Everything that happened with your mate. Everything they're accusing you of. I can't help you if I don't know the truth." Fear coiled in her stomach. "What if you don't believe me?" "I'll believe you." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "The mate bond doesn't lie. I can feel your honesty like a heartbeat. But I need evidence others will accept, proof that will stand against the council's judgment." The mate bond. He felt it too then. Relief and terror warred in Rowan's chest. She wanted to reach for him, to seek comfort in his arms the way every instinct screamed at her to do. But she'd learned the hard way that alphas couldn't be trusted, that their strength could turn to violence in a heartbeat. As if reading her thoughts, River slowly shifted back, giving her space. "I won't hurt you," he said quietly. "I know you have no reason to believe that, but I swear it on the moon goddess herself. You're safe here." Rowan studied his face, the harsh lines softened by firelight, the scars that spoke of battles survived, the eyes that held no cruelty. Her wolf whined, wanting to trust him, wanting to sink into his protection and never surface. "Garrett was the Alpha's nephew," she began, the words coming slowly. "In the Blackwater Pack, that meant he could do whatever he wanted. When he chose me as his mate, I was told I should feel honored, that an Omega like me was lucky to catch an Alpha's attention." River's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, letting her continue. "At first, it wasn't so bad. He was possessive, but I thought that was normal. Expected." Rowan's hands moved to her belly, seeking comfort in the life growing there. "Then the first time I questioned him about where he'd been, he hit me, told me it was my fault for being disrespectful." The fire popped in the hearth. Outside, wind whispered against the windows. "It got worse after that. The healers knew. They had to know. I came to them with broken ribs, black eyes, burns. But Garrett was the Alpha's nephew, and I was just an Omega. They'd patch me up and send me back to him." Her voice cracked. "I thought about running. But where would I go? No pack would take me without my mate's permission, and Garrett would have hunted me down anyway." River's hands were clenched into fists. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "How long?" 2 years. Then I got pregnant." Rowan's hand smoothed over her belly. "Something changed in me when I realized I was carrying a child. I couldn't keep letting him hurt me. I couldn't bring a baby into that. So I started fighting back. That's when he decided to kill you. It wasn't a question. Rowan nodded. I found letters in his study. He was meeting with other wolves, talking about rebellion, about overthrowing the Alpha King, about old powers and ancient rights that I didn't understand. When he caught me reading them, the memory rose up vivid and terrible. Garrett's hands around her throat, the knife on his belt, his voice promising he'd cut the baby out of her before he ended her life. I grabbed a kitchen knife when he threw me against the counter, she said flatly. When he came at me again, I stabbed him. I kept stabbing him until he stopped moving. Then I ran. Silence stretched between them. Rowan couldn't look at River, couldn't bear to see disgust or doubt in his eyes. She'd killed her mate. She was a murderer by the law's definition, no matter what he'd done to her first. Rowan. River's voice made her look up despite herself. What she saw in his face wasn't disgust. It was fury. But not at her. You survived. You protected yourself and your child. There's no shame in that. No guilt. Do you understand me? The law says... The law was written by wolves who never had to fear their own mates. He stood, pacing to the window and back, energy crackling around him. These letters you found. Do you remember any names? Any details? Rowan's brow furrowed. There were symbols, a wolf's head with a crown of thorns, and names. Cole was mentioned, Garrett's brother, and someone called the Shepherd. River went very still. The Shepherd. You know who that is? A rumor. A ghost story we've been chasing for years. He turned to face her fully. If your mate was involved with that faction, if they're the ones who framed you, Rowan, you're in more danger than I thought. Before she could respond, a knock sounded at the door. River opened it to reveal an elderly woman with kind eyes and a healer's bag. She introduced herself as Miriam and set about examining Rowan with gentle efficiency, checking her heartbeat, feeling her belly, asking questions about contractions and bleeding. The baby's strong, Miriam said finally, smiling. Positioning is good. I'd say you have maybe a week before labor begins, possibly less given the stress you've been under. A week. Rowan's execution was scheduled for dawn, or had been, before River stated. But how long could he hold off the council? How long before politics and pressure forced his hand? After Miriam left, River pulled a chair close to the bed but didn't sit. He looked at Rowan with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. I need to review the evidence the council gathered. But I'll have guards posted outside your door. Marcus, my beta, is someone I'd trust with my life. He'll make sure no one disturbs you. You're leaving? The words came out smaller than Rowan intended. Only for a few hours. You need rest, and I need to build your defense. He hesitated, then slowly reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused, strong. The moment their skin touched, the mate bond flared bright and electric between them. Rowan gasped. It felt like lightning and honey, like every nerve ending suddenly coming alive. Her wolf surged forward, desperate to accept him, to complete the bond. River's eyes flashed gold, his wolf rising to meet hers. I feel it too, he murmured, his thumb stroking over her knuckles. Every second I'm near you, it gets stronger. My wolf wants to claim you, protect you, never let you out of my sight. Then why don't you? The question escaped before Rowan could stop it. River's expression turned pained. Because you've spent 2 years with an alpha who took your choice away. I won't do the same, no matter what my instincts demand. When I claim you, if you allow me to, it will be because you chose it freely. Not because you're desperate or afraid or have nowhere else to turn. Tears burned in Rowan's eyes. What if there's no time? What if the council... There will be time. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her scraped knuckles that felt like a vow. I swear to you, Rowan, I will prove your innocence. I will keep you safe. Both of you." Then he released her hand and strode from the room before she could respond, the door closing softly behind him. Rowan sat in the sudden silence, her hand still tingling from his touch. Outside her door, she heard River speaking in low tones to someone. The beta. Marcus, presumably. Then footsteps retreating down the hall. She should sleep. Moon Goddess knew she needed it, but her mind raced with everything that had happened, everything that still could. The mate bond thrummed under her skin, a constant awareness of River even though he was gone. She could almost feel him moving through the fortress, could sense his determination and worry. Was this what it was supposed to feel like? This connection that brought comfort instead of fear? The baby kicked, strong and insistent. Rowan smiled despite everything, her hand moving to the spot. "I know," she whispered. "I feel it too. Maybe we'll be okay after all." River's study was exactly as Rowan had imagined an Alpha King's private space would be. Dark wood and leather, walls lined with books and maps, a massive desk covered in papers and reports. He'd brought her here after midnight, when she'd sent word through the guards that she couldn't sleep and needed to speak with him. Now he spread documents across the desk with barely contained fury. The investigation was a joke. They talked to Garrett's family and friends, all of whom painted him as a saint. They never interviewed anyone who might have witnessed the abuse. They never examined his correspondence or his movements in the weeks before his death. Rowan stood near the fireplace watching River work. He'd shed his formal jacket, working in shirt sleeves that revealed powerful forearms marked with scars. His hair had come loose from its tie, falling around his face as he bent over the papers. "They found what they wanted to find," she said quietly. "An Omega who murdered her mate. A simple story, with a simple solution." "There's nothing simple about this." River pulled out a map, marking locations with quick slashes of ink. "Your mate met with known dissidents here, here, and here. Always in secret. Always at night. Whatever they were planning, it was serious enough to risk the Alpha's wrath." He glanced up at her, his expression softening. "You should be resting." "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see the council's faces. I see the execution platform." Rowan wrapped her arms around herself. "How long do we have? How long before they force your hand?" River set down the map and came to her, stopping just close enough that she could feel his warmth. "The law gives me 3 days to complete my investigation. After that, the council can overrule me with a majority vote." 3 days. It felt like nothing and everything at once. "I'll find the evidence we need," River said, with quiet intensity. "These letters you mentioned, if they still exist, if I can find proof of the conspiracy. They'll say I forged them. They'll say I'm lying to save myself." Despair crept into Rowan's voice. "River, they want me dead. They want this problem to disappear. No amount of evidence will change that." "Then I'll change the council." His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away before cupping her cheek. "Rowan, look at me." She did, meeting those dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "I don't break my promises," he said, "and I promise to keep you safe. That means something, whether the council likes it or not. You can't fight your entire government for me. I'm nobody. Just an Omega who... You're my mate." The words came out fierce, possessive. "You're carrying a child who might be prophesied to unite our people, and even if you were neither of those things, you'd still deserve justice. You'd still deserve someone fighting for you." Rowan's breath caught. The mate bond pulled tight between them, singing with want and need. River's thumb stroked her cheekbone, so gentle despite the strength she could feel thrumming through him. "I want to kiss you," he murmured. "I've wanted to since the moment I saw you in that hall, looking so brave while everyone around you called for your blood. But I meant what I said. I won't take your choice." Rowan's heart hammered against her ribs. She should pull back. She should protect herself from the inevitable pain when this all fell apart. But standing here in the firelight, feeling the warmth of his hand on her face, seeing the raw honesty in his eyes, she couldn't. "Then don't take it," she whispered. "Let me give it to you." She rose on her toes, as much as her pregnant belly would allow, and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, both of them testing this fragile thing between them. Then River made a sound low in his throat, and his arms came around her, careful of her belly, holding her like she was precious. The kiss deepened, and Rowan felt the mate bond explode into full color, felt her wolf howl with joy. This was what she'd been missing, this connection, this rightness. River's lips were warm and sure, his taste like winter nights and promises kept. When his tongue swept against hers, she gasped, and he swallowed the sound, pulling her closer. They broke apart, breathing hard. River rested his forehead against hers, his hands spanning her back. "Rowan," he said, her name like a prayer. Then the baby kicked, hard enough that River felt it against his stomach. He jerked back in surprise, then a grin spread across his face. The first real smile she'd seen from him. "Was that the baby?" Rowan laughed despite everything, the sound watery with unshed tears. "She doesn't like being left out." "She?" River's hand moved to Rowan's belly, tentative. "You know? I just feel it. I think—" Rowan covered his hand with hers. "I think she's going to be strong. Like her mother had to be." River's expression turned solemn. He dropped to one knee in front of her, bringing his face level with her belly. "I promise you," he said to the child inside, "I will protect you. I will protect your mother. You'll be born free and safe, and you'll never know the kind of fear she's lived with." Rowan's tears spilled over then, running hot down her cheeks. She touched River's hair, that dark silk sliding through her fingers. "River, if something happens, it won't. But if it does, if they execute me anyway, promise me you'll take her. Promise me she won't go to Garrett's family, that she won't grow up thinking her mother was a monster." River surged to his feet, his hands framing her face. "Nothing is going to happen to you. Do you hear me? I will move the moon itself before I let them take you from me." "You can't promise that." "Watch me." He kissed her again, hard and desperate, like he could seal the vow with his lips. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing gold. "I'm the Alpha King. I've conquered territories and defeated armies. A corrupt council is nothing compared to what I'll do to keep my mate and her child safe." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Rowan's wolf settle, made something tight in her chest finally loosen. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe she was setting herself up for heartbreak. But in this moment, held in River's arms with their baby moving between them, she let herself believe it was possible. The attack came 3 nights later. Rowan woke from restless sleep to the sound of her door opening. She sat up quickly, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. The room was dark except for dying embers in the fireplace. The guards should have announced any visitor. "Hello?" Her voice came out thin with fear. A figure stepped through the doorway, silhouetted against the hall light. Too big to be the healer, too silent to be friendly. Rowan scrambled backward on the bed, her pregnant body clumsy, her wolf screaming danger. "Who are you?" The figure closed the door, plunging the room into near darkness. Then a blade whispered free of its sheath, and the sound triggered every terror Rowan had learned in 2 years with Garrett. She rolled off the far side of the bed as the assassin lunged. The knife buried itself in the pillow where her head had been. Rowan hit the floor hard, her belly making her movements awkward. She opened her mouth to scream, but a hand clamped over her face from behind. A second attacker. "Should have died quietly," a voice hissed in her ear. "The shepherd sends his regards." Rowan bit down hard on the hand covering her mouth. The attacker cursed and his grip loosened enough for her to wrench free. She screamed with everything she had, the sound ripping from her throat as the first assassin rounded the bed toward her. The door exploded inward. River moved like vengeance incarnate, his wolf form rippling just beneath his skin, eyes blazing gold in the darkness. He caught the first assassin mid-lunge, his hand closing around the man's throat. There was a sickening crack, and the body dropped. The second attacker released Rowan and drew his own blade, spinning to face this new threat. He was fast, trained, deadly. The knife flashed toward River's ribs. River caught his wrist, twisted, and the bone shattered. The assassin's scream cut off abruptly as River's other hand caved in his chest with a single devastating blow. He collapsed in a heap, blood spreading dark across the carpet. Silence fell, broken only by harsh breathing. River's eyes found Rowan where she huddled against the wall, his gaze sweeping over her frantically. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" Rowan shook her head, unable to speak. Her whole body trembled with adrenaline and terror. River crossed the room in 2 strides and gathered her into his arms, lifting her carefully despite the blood on his hands. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. "You're safe. I've got you." Rowan buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, pine and stone and safety. Behind them, she heard running feet as guards poured into the room. Marcus's voice called orders, disbelief and fury mixing in his tone. "How did they get past the watch?" River demanded, not releasing Rowan. "The guards at the door are dead, Your Majesty," Marcus said grimly, throats cut. "These men knew what they were doing. Search them. Find out who sent them." River's arms tightened around Rowan. "Then lock down the fortress. No one enters or leaves without my personal clearance, and send word to the council. I want an emergency session at dawn." "Your Majesty." "Now, Marcus." The beta bowed and withdrew, shouting orders to the gathered guards. River carried Rowan from the bloody chamber, down corridors lit by torches, through doorways guarded by wolves who bowed as their king passed. Rowan lost track of the turns until River shouldered through a heavy door into what had to be his personal chambers. The space was massive, dominated by a bed large enough for a wolf to shift on comfortably. Windows overlooked the dark forest. A fire burned in a hearth carved with ancient symbols. River set Rowan down on a sofa near the fire and knelt before her, his hands running over her arms, her shoulders, checking for injuries. "Tell me you're not hurt. Tell me the baby's okay." "We're fine. I'm fine." Rowan's voice shook. "Those men, they mentioned the shepherd. They said he sent them." River's expression turned murderous. "The conspiracy is real. They're afraid of what you know, what you can reveal. They tried to silence you before I could prove your innocence. They'll try again. Not here. Not in my personal wing." He cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. "You stay with me from now on. In my sight. Under my protection. Anyone who wants to hurt you will have to go through me first." Rowan searched his face. "River, this is bigger than me. If there's truly a conspiracy against you, if the shepherd is real, then killing you serves 2 purposes for them." He finished grimly. "It eliminates a witness and removes the prophesied child who might unite the packs against their rebellion." He stood, pacing to the window. "They've made a mistake, though. Sending assassins into my own fortress is an act of war. The council can't ignore that. What will you do?" "At dawn, I'm calling an emergency session. I'll present everything we know, the evidence of Garrett's conspiracy, the attack tonight, the larger pattern of rebellion. The council will have to act. Or they'll move against you," Rowan thought but didn't say. If corrupt council members were part of the conspiracy, revealing their involvement would back them into a corner. Cornered wolves were the most dangerous kind. River returned to her, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. "Try to rest. I won't leave you. I promise." Rowan caught his hand, intertwining their fingers. The mate bond hummed between them, stronger now after their shared danger. I'm scared. I know. He pressed his lips to her forehead, gentle despite the violence still singing through him. But we're going to survive this. All of us. Rowan wanted to believe him. Sitting here in his chambers, feeling his solid presence beside her, she almost could. But dawn was coming, and with it a reckoning that would determine all their fates. The emergency council session was a battlefield masquerading as government. Rowan stood beside River in the great hall as the council filed in, their faces ranging from concern to barely concealed hostility. She'd insisted on being present despite River's protests, knowing her absence would only fuel speculation. Elder Thorne took his seat with a dark expression. Your Majesty, this session was called on highly irregular grounds. 2 dead men in the accused's chambers hardly constitutes. 2 assassins who murdered my guards and attempted to kill a pregnant woman under my protection. River interrupted, his voice cutting like a blade. Would you prefer I wait until they succeed before bringing this to the council's attention? Councilwoman Vera leaned forward, her sharp features composed. We grieve for the guards who fell, but the attack could have been motivated by any number of factors. Personal vendetta, perhaps. Personal vendetta. Me, River repeated flatly. Against a woman who's been in custody for a week? A woman whose only enemies are those who believe she deserves execution for defending herself? He pulled documents from a leather case and spread them across the council's table. Or perhaps it has to do with these. Correspondence linking Rowan's former mate to a conspiracy against the crown, meeting records, financial transactions, evidence that Garrett Thornton was part of a rebel faction working to destabilize the realm. The council members bent over the papers. Some looked genuinely shocked. Others, Thorne and Vera among them, barely glanced at the documents. Where did you obtain these? Thorne demanded. From Garrett's hidden study, which your so-called investigation somehow missed entirely. River's contempt was palpable. Tell me, Elder, does incompetence run in your investigative teams, or was someone ensuring evidence stayed buried? How dare you suggest— I dare because 2 men tried to murder my mate last night. The words rang through the hall. River's dominance rolled out in waves, making wolves throughout the chamber bow their heads instinctively. Someone ordered that attack. Someone who fears what Rowan knows, what her survival means for their plans. Rowan felt every eye turn to her. She lifted her chin despite her fear, one hand protective over her belly. She wouldn't cower. Not anymore. The evidence is circumstantial at best, Vera said coolly. Open to interpretation. Hardly grounds to overturn a murder conviction. Then what would convince you? River planted his hands on the table, leaning toward them. What evidence would you accept, councilwoman? Or is this trial simply a formality before you execute an innocent woman? She confessed to the killing, Thorne said. She confessed to self-defense, which your rush to judgment conveniently ignored. River straightened, his expression turning cold. Here's what's going to happen. The trial verdict is overturned pending a complete reinvestigation. Rowan will remain under my protection in the fortress. Anyone who approaches her without my explicit permission will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. Your Majesty, you cannot simply— I can, and I am. River's voice dropped to something dangerous. Unless you'd like to challenge my authority directly. Elder Thorne? The old wolf's face mottled with rage, but he held his tongue. Challenging an Alpha King was effectively a declaration of war, and even corrupt council members weren't stupid enough to make that move publicly. However, Vera said, her tone calculating, the law does provide certain protections against even royal decree. Ancient protocols designed to prevent tyranny. Rowan's stomach dropped. She knew that tone. She'd heard it from Garrett's family when they'd maneuvered to trap her. Article 12 of the Founding Laws, Vera continued, pulling an ancient tome from beneath the table. In cases where an Alpha King's judgment may be compromised by personal interest, the council may invoke the right of sacred neutrality. The king is removed from authority over the case, and the council's judgment becomes final. River's entire body went rigid. You're invoking the right. We must. Thorn's satisfaction was poorly concealed. Your connection to the accused is obvious, Your Majesty. Your judgment cannot be trusted. Therefore, the council will reconvene tomorrow at dawn to deliver our final verdict. Which you've already decided, River said flatly. Justice must be served. Vera closed the tome with a definitive thud. The accused will be returned to the dungeon to await judgment. You, Your Majesty, will be confined to your quarters until the matter is resolved. Guards will ensure you don't interfere. You can't do this. Rowan's voice came out choked. River, they can't. Actually, they can. Marcus stepped forward from where he'd been standing at the wall, his expression agonized. The right is ancient law, Your Majesty. Even you are bound by it. If you fight this, you'll be labeled a tyrant, and every pack in the realm will turn against you. River looked at his beta, betrayal written across his face. Marcus, I'm sorry. The words sounded genuine, but Marcus didn't back down. Guards, please escort His Majesty to his chambers. Gently, but firmly. Wolves in royal livery moved forward, their faces reluctant but determined. River's eyes flashed gold as his wolf surged forward, and for a moment Rowan thought he'd fight them all, law or no law. Then his gaze found hers, and the fury in his expression transformed into something that looked like grief. I'll fix this, he said. Rowan, I swear to you. Remove him, Thorn ordered. The guards took River's arms. He could have killed them all without effort, but it would mean civil war. Would mean destroying everything he'd built. So he went, letting them lead him from the hall while he stared back at Rowan with desperation written across every line of his body. Then hands closed on Rowan's shoulders. Different guards. These ones rough and uncaring as they dragged her toward the rear exit. She struggled instinctively, but her pregnant body was no match for their strength. River! She screamed his name, heard him roar in response, heard the scuffle as he fought against his captors. River, please! But they were pulling her down familiar corridors, down stone steps that led to darkness and damp and despair. The dungeon door clanged shut behind her with terrible finality. Rowan was alone again, just as she'd been at the start. Except now it was so much worse, because now she knew exactly what she was losing. The mate bond stretched between her and River like a physical wound, and she could feel his anguish as clearly as her own. She sank onto the thin pallet and wrapped her arms around her belly, around the child who would be born into a world without her mother. Tears streamed down her face unchecked. I'm sorry, she whispered to the baby. I'm so sorry I couldn't keep my promise. Above her she heard River roaring her name, heard furniture shattering as he destroyed his prison in impotent rage. The mate bond throbbed with his fury and grief. Dawn was coming, and with it, the end of everything. River's chambers had become a cage. He paced the length of the room for the 100th time, the mate bond stretching tight between him and Rowan, like a wire about to snap. Every instinct screamed at him to tear through the guards outside his door, to reach her, to protect her. But Marcus had been right. Fighting the right would make him a tyrant in the eyes of every pack, would undermine everything he'd built. Unless he found another way. The ancient laws that bound him also offered loopholes for those brave enough to exploit them. River stopped his pacing and stared at the wall where he'd mounted his father's sword, the blade that had united the northern packs through combat and blood. The same laws that created the right of sacred neutrality also honored an older tradition, one that predated councils and politics entirely. The right of challenge. If River couldn't overturn the council's decision through authority, he could do it the way his ancestors had, through combat. Any wolf could challenge for leadership if they were willing to stake their life on it. And if an Alpha King challenged corrupt council members directly, the law said they couldn't refuse without admitting their cowardice before every pack in the realm. River grabbed the sword from the wall. The weight of it felt right in his hand, familiar. He'd won his crown through strength and strategy. He could win Rowan's freedom the same way. He strode to the door and pounded on it with his fist. "Marcus, I know you're out there. Open this door." Silence. Then his beta's voice, pained. "Your Majesty, I can't. The right forbids. The right forbids me from interfering with the trial. It says nothing about challenging the council to honorable combat." River kept his voice level, calculating. "Open this door, Marcus, or I'll tear it off its hinges and you'll have to explain to the other packs why their king destroyed his own fortress." More silence. Then the scrape of a key in the lock. The door swung open to reveal Marcus, his expression torn between duty and loyalty. Behind him, guards stood with hands on their weapons but uncertainty in their eyes. "You're talking about the right of challenge," Marcus said quietly. "Your Majesty, that's the oldest law we have. Older than councils, older than trials." River stepped into the corridor and the guards instinctively backed away from the dominance rolling off him. "Thorn and Vera want Rowan dead to protect their conspiracy. I'm giving them a chance to stop me, if they can defeat me in single combat. They'll never accept. They're not warriors. Then they'll have to admit they're too weak to back their own judgment, which invalidates their authority." River's smile was cold. "Either way, I get what I want. Spread the word, Marcus. At dawn, in the combat arena, I'm issuing a formal challenge to every council member who voted for Rowan's execution. They can face me, or they can step down. Those are their only options." Marcus stared at him for a long moment, something like admiration crossing his face. "You magnificent bastard. You're forcing them into a corner. They forced my mate into one first." River started walking, and the guards scrambled to get out of his way. "Now send runners to every pack within riding distance. I want witnesses. I want the entire realm to see what happens to wolves who pervert justice for their own gain. And if they send champions to fight in their place, then I'll cut through them all until I reach the cowards hiding behind them." River's wolf pressed close to the surface, making his eyes flash gold. "Nothing is going to stop me from reaching Rowan before dawn. Nothing." The combat arena filled with wolves as false dawn painted the sky gray. River stood at the center of the sand-covered ground, his father's sword in hand, watching the crowd gather in the rising tiers of stone seating. Word had spread fast. An Alpha King issuing challenge to his own council was unprecedented in living memory. Wolves from a dozen packs had ridden through the night to witness it. Marcus appeared at the arena's edge, his face grim. "They've accepted. Thorn and Vera both, along with council members Aldrich and Kane. 4 opponents. They're bringing champions? 3 each. 12 fights total before you can face the council members themselves." Marcus climbed over the low wall separating the arena from the seating. "Your Majesty, even for you, that's necessary." River rolled his shoulders, feeling his muscles warm up, his wolf eager for the violence to come. "How is Rowan?" "Still in the dungeon. They're preparing to move her to the execution grounds at dawn." Marcus's voice roughened. "River, if you don't win this in time, I will." It wasn't confidence. It was certainty. Failure simply wasn't an option. The mate bond thrummed between him and Rowan, and he could feel her fear, her desperation, could feel her trying to be brave for their child even as she faced death. The first champion entered the arena, a massive wolf with scars covering his arms and a warhammer strapped to his back. The crowd roared. River barely heard them. His focus narrowed to the opponent, to the fight, to the path he'd carve through anyone who stood between him and his mate. The champion shifted into wolf form, all gray fur and snapping teeth. River met him head-on, his sword flashing in the growing light. The fight was brutal but brief. River's blade found the champion's throat, and the wolf collapsed in a spray of blood. The second champion was faster, fighting with twin daggers and wolfish speed. She danced around River's strikes, looking for openings. River let her think she'd found one, then caught her wrist and broke it with a sharp twist. When she stumbled, his sword ended it. 3 more. 4 more. River lost count as blood slicked the arena sand, as his muscles burned and his breath came hard. Each opponent was skilled, dangerous. Each one died or yielded beneath his relentless assault. The crowd's roar became a constant background thunder, but River's world had narrowed to the fight, to survival, to winning. The mate bond stretched tighter. Dawn was coming. Rowan was running out of time. The final champion before Thorn himself was a giant of a wolf, nearly 7 feet tall in human form, wielding a battle axe that could split a boulder. He came at River with devastating power, each blow strong enough to shatter bones. River's arms shook as he blocked strike after strike, his endurance finally flagging. The giant's axe caught his shoulder, cutting through leather and skin. Blood ran hot down River's arm. The crowd gasped. But River felt the pain and welcomed it, let it sharpen his focus. He dropped low on the next swing, came up inside the giant's reach, and drove his sword through the man's chest. The giant fell like a tree. Silence blanketed the arena for a heartbeat. Then Elder Thorn stepped over the wall. The old wolf moved stiffly, clearly unused to combat, but his eyes burned with hatred. "You can't win, boy. Even if you kill me, the law has been invoked. The execution will proceed. Unless the council member who invoked the right is dead or yields." River circled him slowly, favoring his wounded shoulder. "You wrote those laws yourself, Thorn. Did you think I wouldn't study them?" "You're a fool." Thorn pulled a blade from his robes, not a warrior's weapon, but steel nonetheless. "Fighting for an Omega who murdered her mate. She's poisoned your mind with the mate bond. She's innocent, and you know it." River's voice carried across the arena. "You and Vera and the rest of the Shepherd's conspirators framed her because she knew about Garrett's treason. You're willing to execute a pregnant woman to hide your own crimes." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Thorn's face mottled with rage. "Lies! I'll see you stripped of your crown for this." He lunged with surprising speed. River sidestepped, brought his sword around, and opened Thorn's side with a precise cut. The elder staggered but kept his feet, slashing wildly. River ducked under the blade and swept Thorn's legs out from under him. The old wolf hit the sand hard. River's boot came down on his wrist, pinning the knife hand. His sword point rested against Thorn's throat. "Yield," River commanded. "Yield and confess your part in the conspiracy, or I end you here." Thorn's eyes blazed with impotent fury. But he could see his death in River's face, could feel the blade pressing against his pulse. "I yield." "Louder, so everyone can hear you." "I yield." Thorn's shout echoed across the arena. "The trial was false. We conspired to execute the Omega to hide our involvement with the rebel faction. I yield." River stepped back, breathing hard, his shoulders screaming. He raised his voice to address the crowd. "By ancient law, I've won the right of challenge. The trial verdict is overturned. Rowan is under my protection, and anyone who touches her will answer to me." The crowd erupted, some cheering, others shouting in confusion or anger. River didn't wait to hear more. He was already running, vaulting the arena wall, racing through the fortress corridors toward the dungeon. But as he burst out into the courtyard, he saw the procession already forming. Guards surrounded a figure in prisoner's whites, leading her toward the execution grounds at the far end of the compound. The sky was lightening to pearl gray. It was dawn. River's roar shook the stones of the fortress. "Stop!" Rowan felt the first contraction as they dragged her onto the platform. She'd been feeling tightness in her belly all night, but she'd attributed it to fear and stress. Now, as rough hands positioned her over the execution block, she felt her entire abdomen seize with undeniable purpose. Her water broke in a warm rush down her legs, soaking through the thin prisoner's clothes. "No," she gasped. "No, the baby. Should have thought of that before you murdered your mate," the executioner said coldly. He raised his axe, the blade catching the dawn light. Then River's roar split the air. The executioner hesitated. Every wolf in the courtyard turned toward the sound. River emerged from the fortress like a storm-given form, blood-stained and magnificent, his dominance preceding him in waves. Marcus and a dozen loyal guards ran behind him. "The challenge is won!" River's voice carried across the courtyard. "By ancient law, the trial is overturned. Anyone who harms her commits treason." The guards holding Rowan exchanged uncertain glances. The executioner lowered his axe slightly, confusion crossing his face. Another contraction hit, stronger this time. Rowan cried out, her knees buckling. She felt something shift inside her, something that had been locked away her entire life suddenly tearing free. Heat rushed through her veins, and her wolf that had always been weak and quiet, surged forward with shocking power. Silver light exploded from Rowan's skin. The transformation took her by surprise. She'd never shifted, not once in her life. Omegas rarely could. But now her wolf ripped free, and she felt her body changing, felt her bones reshaping. Except instead of the small, weak form she'd expected, power flooded through her. When the light faded, Rowan stood on 4 legs covered in silver fur that seemed to glow in the dawn light. The courtyard fell into stunned silence. Silver wolves were legend, spoken of in prophecies and ancient texts. They were said to possess powers beyond normal shifters, were marked by the moon goddess herself. River reached the platform and stopped, awe written across his face. "Rowan?" Another contraction hit, forcing her to shift back to human form. She collapsed on the wooden planks, her body slick with sweat and fluid, labor progressing with frightening speed. "River, the baby. I can't, it's coming." He was beside her in an instant, gathering her into his arms. "I've got you. Someone get the healer, now." As he lifted her, Rowan felt her newly awakened wolf stir again, and with it came something else. A rush of images that weren't hers. Garrett's memories, his final moments, flooding through her with crystal clarity. Her silver wolf had unlocked abilities she'd never known existed, and one of them was reading the memories of those she'd touched. She could show them. She could prove her innocence. "Wait," Rowan gasped. She reached out with her new power, instinctively understanding how to use it. The silver light flared again, and suddenly images projected into the air above them, visible to everyone gathered. A wolf's magic given form. They saw Garrett's study, saw Rowan entering, heavily pregnant, looking for the healer's herbs she'd stored there. Saw her find the letters by accident, her face paling as she read about treason and rebellion. Saw Garrett enter behind her, his face transforming to rage. Saw him grab her by the throat, slam her against the wall. Heard his words. "You've seen too much. Should have gotten rid of you months ago, but the shepherd wanted to wait. Too late now. I'll cut the brat out of you before I end this." Saw Rowan grab the kitchen knife from the counter in desperation. Saw her stab him as he lunged for her belly. Saw her keep stabbing as he tried to rise, tried to finish what he'd started. Saw her finally stumble away, sobbing, covered in blood but alive. Self-defense, survival, truth. The images faded. Rowan sagged against River, her power exhausted, another contraction tearing through her. The courtyard remained silent for a long moment. Then Marcus's voice rang out. "The accused is innocent. Let it be witnessed by all packs here present." A roar of agreement rose from the crowd. Not everyone. Rowan could see faces still twisted with hatred or disbelief, but enough. Enough to matter. "Healer's chambers," River commanded, already moving. "Clear the way." He ran with Rowan in his arms, her contractions coming faster now, barely a minute apart. The baby was coming whether they were ready or not, and Rowan's body had decided it had endured enough. She was going to give birth, and she was going to do it now. Miriam met them at the door to her chambers, her face pale but determined. "Get her on the bed, Your Majesty, I need space to work." River laid Rowan down on clean sheets, but he didn't move away. His hand found hers, their fingers interlacing. "I'm staying." "River." Rowan gasped as another contraction peaked. "If something happens—" "Nothing's happening except you bringing our daughter into this world." His other hand brushed sweat-dampened hair from her face. "I promised you I'd keep you safe. Both of you. I'm not leaving." Rowan wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he didn't have to claim her child as his. But another contraction hit, and suddenly all she could do was push, her body taking over with primal purpose. "That's it," Miriam encouraged. "The baby's crowning. One more big push, Rowan, you can do this." The pain was enormous, all-consuming. Rowan screamed, squeezing River's hand hard enough that she felt bones grind, but he didn't flinch, didn't pull away. He leaned close, his lips against her temple, murmuring encouragements and promises. "Almost there," he said. "You're so strong, so brave. Just a little more, love." Rowan pushed with everything she had, and suddenly pressure released. A baby's cry filled the chamber. Strong, indignant, furious at being born into noise and light. "A girl," Miriam announced, her voice choked with emotion. "A healthy baby girl." She placed the infant on Rowan's chest, and Rowan's arms came up instinctively to cradle her. The baby was perfect, tiny, red-faced, covered in vernix and blood, and absolutely perfect. Dark hair plastered to her skull, eyes squeezed shut against the brightness, and on her left shoulder blade, visible even through the birth fluids, was a mark. A silver crescent moon surrounded by stars, just as the ancient prophecy described. "The prophesied child," River breathed, his voice full of wonder. His finger traced the mark gently. "She's really here." Rowan looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "We did it. We survived." "You survived?" River kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You're innocent. You're free. You're—" The explosion cut off his words. The fortress shook. Outside, shouting erupted into screams. The sound of battle, metal on metal, snarls and roars, echoed through the corridors. River's head snapped toward the door, his entire body going rigid. "They're attacking now. The rebels are making their move." "During the birth?" Miriam's face went pale. "They must be desperate. Or they think we're vulnerable." River stood, his expression torn between staying and fighting. "I have to go. I have to defend the fortress." "Go," Rowan said, even though every instinct screamed to hold him close. "We'll be safe here." "Marcus!" River's shout brought his beta running into the room. "Guard this door with your life. No one gets through to them. No one." "With my life," Marcus promised. River kissed Rowan one more time, fierce and desperate. Then he was gone, running toward the sounds of battle with his bloody sword still in hand. Rowan held her daughter close, feeling Miriam work between her legs to deliver the afterbirth. The baby had stopped crying, her tiny face peaceful against Rowan's chest. Outside, the sounds of combat grew louder. Then Rowan felt it, her silver wolf stirring again, responding to the threat. She'd used her power to reveal the truth. Could she use it to protect? She closed her eyes and reached for that well of magic inside her. It came more easily this time, responding to her desperate need. Silver light began to glow from her skin, spreading outward like ripples on water. "What are you doing?" Miriam asked, staring. "Protecting my child." Rowan pushed the power out, creating a barrier around the healer's wing that shimmered like moonlight. "No one gets through. Not while I have breath." The barrier settled into place, invisible but solid. Outside it, Rowan could hear rebels trying to break through, their weapons clanging against the shield. But it held. Her power held. She was a silver wolf now. She was the prophesied child's mother, and she would protect her daughter with everything she had. River fought like the wolf he was, savage, relentless, unstoppable. The rebels had planned their attack well, waiting until he was exhausted from the challenges, waiting until Rowan was vulnerable. But they hadn't accounted for his fury, for the protective rage of a mate and chosen father. His sword cut through rebel after rebel. Beside him, loyal guards fought with equal determination. The battle raged through courtyards and corridors, blood staining ancient stones. Then River felt it, a wave of power washing over the fortress, strengthening his tired muscles, clearing his mind. Silver light pulsed from the healer's wing, and every wolf loyal to him felt their strength surge. The rebels stumbled, suddenly weakened, their conspiracy's power broken by the prophesied child's birth. The tide turned. River pressed forward, cutting through the remaining rebels until he reached their leader, a wolf in black armor who removed his helmet to reveal Cole, Garrett's brother. "This isn't over," Cole snarled. "The shepherd will—" River's sword took his head before he could finish. The body collapsed, and with it, the rebellion's heart. Silence fell gradually as the last rebels were subdued or fled. River stood in the bloodied courtyard, breathing hard, his entire body aching, but alive, still alive. "Your Majesty!" Marcus appeared, grinning despite the blood covering him. "The fortress is secure. The rebellion is broken." River didn't wait to hear more. He ran back to the healer's chambers, his heart in his throat. The silver barrier shimmered and parted at his approach, recognizing him. He burst through the door to find Rowan sitting up in bed, their daughter at her breast, looking tired but triumphant. "It's over," he said, his voice rough. "They're defeated." "I know." Rowan smiled up at him, silver light still dancing in her eyes. "I felt it. Felt them break against my shields." River crossed to the bed and sank down beside them, his hands gentle as he touched the baby's downy head. She'd stopped nursing and was sleeping peacefully, her tiny fingers curled against Rowan's skin. "She's perfect," he whispered. "You're both perfect." Rowan leaned against him, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "We survived. All of us. I can't quite believe it." "Believe it." River wrapped his arm around her carefully, holding his new family close. "You're free, Rowan. Innocent in the eyes of all packs. And this little one." He gazed at the sleeping infant. "She's going to change everything." Outside, the sun rose fully, painting the sky gold and pink. A new day, a new beginning. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Rowan felt safe enough to close her eyes and rest, knowing she and her daughter were protected by a love that had conquered death itself.